I've been looking forward to getting your take on what's happening now in Iran. It appears that both sides are rejecting each other's proposals for peace, and it doesn't seem to be a clear meeting point anywhere. Do you think it's likely we'll be going back to war?
Well, I do. On the other hand, I have not been keeping up with the variety of responses that we are eliciting from Washington. President Trump said something about a negotiation, and there seemed to have been some willingness on the American side to be more flexible. The idea of let's set aside the nuclear issue and other things and sort things out for the strait. So if you're telling me that everyone has now firmly rejected everyone else's proposal, I believe it. But I haven't seen anything final from Donald Trump. And of course, you never know what you're going to get out of Donald Trump. He seems to negotiate against himself a lot. There's not much evidence that he's really talking to anybody else. So who knows what's real and what isn't. But I think what's most important right now is the idea that Mr. Netanyahu is coming to Washington. And that's the latest rumor. I haven't seen it officially announced yet anywhere, but I have it on fairly good authority that he's flying to Washington. The last time he did that, of course, you had the war breakout. He visited, he spoke. Everyone was sort of in the kissy face, huggy bod mode. And then suddenly he flew back, the war began, and Trump said, oh gosh, we need to join the war. And off we went. So I don't know what's going to happen now, but the fact that he's coming to visit tells me that he wants to make sure that Trump is not losing his grip, that Trump is not weakening, that Trump is not trying to cut a separate deal. All of those things may or may not be true. I have no idea. So at this point, I would expect it to start up. I just don't know when. The interesting thing is this overlaps, as you know, with the Hajj in Saudi Arabia that begins on the 24th, and that's usually a 10 or 11-day event. So that would mean that we would be going to war in the middle of the so-called pilgrimage. Whether or not that's significant, I have no idea. The other thing is that I'm still unclear on whether or not the Saudis and the Qataris are going to authorize our use of their airspace, or for that matter, any bases. I don't know what the outcome there is. I mean, there's so much, I don't want to say disinformation, but contradictory information floating around inside the Beltway. It's very hard to know what is real or isn't. But to go back to your original question, do I think they'll go back to fighting? Yes, I do.
Welcome back to World Talk Recap. Today we're diving deep into explosive insights from Colonel Douglas McGregor on the powder keg that is Iran. The big question on everyone's mind. After a fragile pause, are we hurtling straight back into full-scale war? Colonel McGregor doesn't sugarcoat it. He sees conflict as likely. Netanyahu's rumored trip to Washington raises huge red flags, echoing the last time he visited, schmoozed, and then boom, war erupted. Trump's unpredictable style, negotiating against himself, adds to the chaos. Throw in the Hajj pilgrimage timing, and the stakes feel apocalyptic. Takeaway: this segment reveals how personal diplomacy and timing can dictate global chaos. Netanyahu's visit isn't just a meeting. It's a pressure move to lock Trump in and prevent any independent U.S.-Iran deal. History shows these visits often precede escalation, not peace. The overlapping Hajj adds a dangerous layer, potentially inflaming religious tensions during a sacred time. McGregor's skepticism about disinformation in D.C. highlights how hard it is to separate signal from noise in Beltway echo chambers. Bottom line, personal alliances and domestic politics are driving decisions that could reshape the Middle East. Before we wrap this up, get ready for segment 2, where we break down what both sides have been doing during the ceasefire and why the next round could be brutally intense. What do you think? Will Netanyahu's visit spark the next war? Drop your thoughts below.
Well, what has changed though during this ceasefire, the pause? To what extent has each side been able to replenish their arms, regroup, and I guess prepare for war again? And also, what would you expect to see different this time around? Would Would the US go faster up the escalation ladder? I assume Iran would respond in kind. I mean, given that Trump wanted the ceasefire, what do you think is going to be done different this time around?
I think that the opening will be a sledgehammer by the United States, frankly. My impression is that we have brought not only, let's back up a minute. We talk in military terms in the Army about basic loads of ammunition. Usually you think in terms of 3 basic loads. There's the first one that is supposed to get you through the first week or so of combat. Then there's the second that is supposed to come in and assure that you can stay there for another week or 2 weeks. Then there's a third that keeps you in the fight for a month. I think we have something like that happening right now with our air and naval forces. We are absolutely loaded to the gills with munitions and aircraft and missiles. No question about it. Everything is ready to go. But in addition to that, this time around, I think we have almost the same amount of ammunition in reserve, which means that instead of getting a 3 or 4 year intensive bombardment or 3 or 4 day intensive bombardment, you could conceivably keep it going for 5 to 7 days. So I expect that this will be much more intense, much more severe, inflict much more damage. Now, the question is, what does that mean to targeting? And I don't have access to the targeteer, but if you are limited to air and naval power and you don't have any ground forces that you can use to exploit strikes, then it becomes an exercise in trying to determine which target set is going to be the most useful to you in terms of compelling the enemy to collapse or disintegrate or surrender. I don't know. I'm sure we'll hit all of the targets we hit previously because we now know, thanks to the CIA leak to the New York Times, that the Iranians emerged from the last round with virtually 90% of everything intact. Well, if 90% was intact the last time around, that means we're now facing, with almost complete certainty, 100% readiness, because I think that level of replenishment has occurred on the Iranian side. In addition to that, there are several sources claiming that additional Russian radars for air and missile defense, and some for purely targeting at great distance, and the Chinese have brought in some additional missiles, some of the same ones that have been fired in the past, but a new class of missile, a very well-known but not used thus far cruise missile designed to sink ships at sea out to 300-kilometer ranges. So that means, 180 miles. That would probably hold everyone quite a distance from the opening to the Persian Gulf. Now, the other thing is that there's evidence that Russian and Chinese technicians are also on the ground helping to operate these systems. Now, none of that should surprise us because we've been doing that in Ukraine for the Ukrainians against the Russians now for years. But nevertheless, you have people in Washington who say, well, this is outrageous. We can't have, what are these Russians and Chinese doing? Well, what do you think they're doing? They're doing to us what we've been doing to them. So I think this is a very serious moment. I think we're going to see far more damage this time done by both sides to each other.
The pause wasn't peace, it was preparation. Colonel McGregor paints a chilling picture. The U.S. is loaded with munitions for a prolonged, devastating assault, potentially stretching far beyond the last round's short strikes. Expect a much more intense opening barrage. Think 5 to 7 days of nonstop fury instead of quick hits. Iran has likely rebuilt to near 100% readiness, bolstered by Russian radars, Chinese missiles, and on-ground technicians. This time, both sides come in heavier and smarter. Takeaway, militarily, this shifts everything. The U.S. isn't just reloading. It's prepositioning for sustained dominance using air and naval power. But without ground forces to exploit damage, it risks becoming an expensive attrition game. Iran's upgrades, anti-ship missiles that can keep forces at bay 180-plus miles out, show how adversaries are rapidly closing the tech gap. McGregor's Army logistics insight, basic loads of ammo scaled up massively, explains why this round could inflict unprecedented damage. The involvement of Russian and Chinese personnel mirrors U.S. actions in Ukraine, turning this into a proxy superpower clash with real-world escalation risks. This isn't just regional, it's a test of 21st century warfare limits. If you're fired up by these insights, hit that subscribe button on World Talk Recap and turn on notifications. We break down global power plays like no one else. What surprises you most about the military buildup? Tell us in the comments.
And I think that we can bet with virtually 100% certainty that Iran will finish off the oil infrastructure on the west side of the Persian Gulf. And I imagine they may well go after the desalination plants that have an enormous impact on Saudi Arabia, not just the Emirates, to the point where if they destroy the one that's in Al-Shabail, then that means Riyadh runs out of drinking water almost instantly, in which case they have to evacuate the capital because they have no other way to provide drinking water. So this is a very serious moment. And I think it reflects, particularly on Donald Trump's side and with Mr. Netanyahu, a certain level of desperation. They've got to win this in their minds. Do whatever it takes short of the use of a nuclear weapon. Now, some people think that the Israelis could actually break that taboo and use a nuclear weapon. I don't know. I certainly hope not, because that would open up Pandora's box and then anything becomes possible. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think every conceivable form of attack is going to be employed this time around with far more intensity than we saw the first time.
Iran won't just defend, they'll hit where it hurts most. McGregor warns they could finish off Western Persian Gulf oil infrastructure and target critical desalination plants. Destroy the one near Riyadh? Saudi Arabia's capital could run out of drinking water almost overnight, triggering mass evacuations. This round means far more mutual damage, with desperation driving both Trump and Netanyahu to win at all costs short of nukes. Takeaway: the targeting logic here is ruthless and strategic. With no ground invasion possible, success depends on breaking the enemy's will through economic and humanitarian pain. Iran's ability to disrupt oil flows and water supplies exposes the fragility of Gulf states despite their wealth. Russian/Chinese support levels the playing field, turning a U.S.-led campaign into a broader confrontation. McGregor's comparison to U.S. actions elsewhere underscores the hypocrisy cycle in international relations. This segment shows how modern wars increasingly target infrastructure that sustains civilian life, with global ripple effects on energy and stability that could last years. Buckle up. Next, we tackle the reported rift between Trump and Netanyahu in segment 4. Could targeting water plants change the entire war? What's your take? Comment now.
Well, about this reported split between Trump and Netanyahu. So allegedly, Trump wants to make a peace with the Iranians, or at least get a longer pause. And Netanyahu wants to continue to degrade the Iranian military, ideally knock out the government. Do you think this is there's a lot of substance to this, or is it meant to make the Iranians lower their guard, or how are you reading the situation? Because it could be possible.
Well, I think the Persian Gulf has turned out to be, for Donald Trump, the Hotel California. You check in, but you can never check out. He'd like to check out. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. But he also has obligations to his Israeli lobby, not just Mr. Netanyahu personally and the Israeli state, but to his donors who funded his election. And I think they want the complete and utter annihilation of Iran. And I think he's probably saying, well, I understand that, but what if we can't do that? Then their answer is go back and find another way to do it. In other words, there's no easy exit for Mr. Trump from this mess. So I think the best that he could hope for is what you just described, some sort of pause. And whenever you get a pause, I think he spends a great deal of time trying to figure out, well, how do I exploit this pause to either win or escape? One of the two. And I don't think it's working out very well for him, because I don't think there's an easy answer. So I think, yes, there's probably a split along those lines. But on the other hand, how much maneuver room has President Trump really left himself? Now, we know from the past that he's a very, very much inclined to exaggerate, and he frequently lies about the level of discourse between Iran and the United States, between Iran and Pakistan, between Iran and the Emirates, or the Emirates and Pakistan. So it's very hard to gauge what's real and what isn't. So I've really gotten to the point now where I don't bother trying to figure out what's real and what is. It's a waste of time. So I think he's in the Hotel California. He wants to check out. He can't. That means he's got to restart the war. Now, what happens if he restarts the war and after another 3 weeks, we're zero, nowhere? We're in the same position we were before. Well, then he's humiliated. Then he has to make an ignominious withdrawal. He has to admit failure. Will he do that? I don't know. He may say, well, there's nothing left now. It'll be another midnight hammer exercise. We've destroyed everything. There's no reason to keep this up. Iran no longer represents a threat to anybody. Iran is impotent. Its neighbors are no longer afraid. Of course, most of its neighbors no longer exist because they've been bombed out of existence in the Persian Gulf region. But he may say that and then say, I'm going home and I plan to attend the World Cup. Who knows? Anything is possible. But what will people at home feel? What will they think? And we can't be certain of that right now because the real effects of the disaster in the Gulf haven't been felt here yet. I think by the end of June, the beginning of July, our strategic petroleum reserve is going to be getting very low to the point where it's in danger of going dry. That puts us in a difficult position. It's already clear that we can't afford to export all of the crude that people are asking us to export.
Trump finds himself stuck in the Middle East's Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. He wants a pause or deal, but faces enormous pressure from Netanyahu, the Israeli lobby, and big donors who demand Iran's total annihilation. McGregor sees real tension here, yet doubts Trump has much room to maneuver. Exaggerations and shifting narratives make truth hard to pin down. Takeaway: this captures the brutal politics of foreign policy. Trump's campaign promises clash with entrenched interests and realities on the ground. The Hotel California metaphor perfectly illustrates path dependency in geopolitics. Once committed, extraction costs skyrocket. Domestic lobbies and donor influence shape decisions as much as strategy. McGregor's point about Trump's pattern of exaggeration reminds us to treat official narratives skeptically. A failed second round could humiliate the administration, forcing either ignominious withdrawal or dangerous doubling down, with huge implications for U.S. credibility worldwide. If these breakdowns are delivering value, smash subscribe to World Talk Recap. We're your go-to for unfiltered global analysis every week. Is Trump truly trapped, or does he have a secret exit? Share your prediction.
He's able to regime change and, well, destroy Iran. Worst case, that he has to pull back. You know, he can declare victory, point to how many people have been killed and the navy destroyed, all of this. A bit like Yemen, and just declare victory and go home. But the problem, of course, is if the Iranians hold the Strait of Hormuz, then they can put a higher toll on countries that threaten Iran's economy with sanctions, threaten Iran by hosting U.S. bases. They can put extra toll on countries that trade in the U.S. dollar. So that's what I was wondering, how does the world look like if the U.S. is effectively defeated in Iran, if defined as the U.S. having to pull back with the Strait of Hormuz then solid under Iranian control, and being able to essentially use the tolls to create this incentive system to have its own economic and military security, well, shored up.
Whatever happens next, whether we attack or we do not attack, whether we try to leave and say we were successful or not, I think we, Americans, are finished in the Middle East. And I think that's the greatest concern that Mr. Netanyahu has right now. If we cannot break Iran's grip on the Persian Gulf, if we cannot force our way back into the Persian Gulf, and I think it's pretty clear that we cannot, that means that we are finished in the region. We will not come back into these bases. There will be nothing to rebuild. It will be a decade before the countries that existed there even recover, if some of them ever recover at all. Because frankly, in that part of the world, there just isn't enough water to support much development. So I think that's the greatest single problem. Not so much for us. Let's be frank. I would argue that we should have withdrawn from most of the overseas bases a long time ago. And I've been giving briefings to war college classes, to Army audiences, to any audience that would listen for the last 15 plus years, that the whole notion of forward military presence is finished. And everybody looks at me, well, you're crazy. And I kept trying to tell everyone, we have new capabilities today. Whatever you put forward in a forward presence mode, that means in bases like the ones in the UAE, bases in Germany, bases in Korea, bases in Thailand, bases in the Philippines. It doesn't matter where you go. You are now a target array waiting to be destroyed. You can be easily identified, easily targeted, and enough theater or tactical ballistic missiles or cruise missiles can be launched to wipe out your forward presence at the beginning of any conflict or crisis. So I've urged that we abandon this forward presence nonsense. Remember that forward presence was justified in the aftermath of World War II, not just by the Cold War, but by the assumption that by being there, we were going to prevent other conflicts from breaking out. Well, that hasn't worked, has it? It hasn't worked largely because we're the ones causing many of the conflicts. But the bottom line is those days are over. So in one sense, this is a blessing insofar as it's going to compel us to pull our forces back and come home. At least we can protect them inside the continental United States if defense becomes the primary focus. Because our whole force posture, our military thinking since the end of the Second World War has been offensive. The best defense is the offense. That was always the argument. If we're forward, we can attack quickly. We can nip this problem in the bud. In other words, we can solve this problem before it gets out of control. Those days are over. Technology has changed. You cannot do that anymore. And if you try, you'll just lose your forces. That means we've got to come back to the continental United States and figure out how are we going to defend ourselves? Because the strategic defense is now superior to any strategic offense. The only thing that is left that we cannot stop are hypersonic missiles in the form of intercontinental ballistic missiles, which means that we live permanently, and the Russians and the Chinese and others who have ICBMs permanently under the threat of total destruction if any of those are used. So other than that, which is unchanging, the world is a very, very different place. We can't operate in the world of the past. It's gone. This is a new world. So what are we going to do? I don't think Americans have thought that through. I don't think anyone in Washington has thought it through. And they're all very reactionary. Oh, we can never leave Korea. Oh, we can never leave Japan. Well, wait a minute. We don't live in Korea. We don't live in Japan. They're not part of the United States. What do you mean you say we can't leave? And now we have governments like the one in South Korea that's effectively telling us, listen, we really think you ought to get out. Now, they don't say that publicly, but they do behind doors, closed doors, and they're very polite about it. But it's getting to the point where at some point in time, there will be no more politeness, and they will just say, come on, you got to go. Now, why would they want us to go? For the same reason that I don't think anyone's going to invite us back into the Gulf, because we are seen as a catalyst for conflict. We are not indigenous to the region. We're not organic to the international system in that area. Wherever we are foreign, a foreign entity, and we have the potential to drag countries with us into conflicts that they would otherwise never fight, we are unwanted. And we have now gone to war with Iran largely as a result of Israel's interests, not our own. And that's the problem. No one wants to be dragged into anything unless it involves them. And the one state among the Emirates that was most interested in the same thing Israel was the United Arab Emirates. They were effectively aligned with Israel. So they were interested in the destruction of Iran. That has not worked. That's been a disaster for the UAE.
Whatever happens next, McGregor delivers the bombshell. America is likely finished as a dominant force in the Middle East. Forward bases are now just targets. Technological shifts, ballistic and cruise missiles, make old forward presence doctrines obsolete. Broader crises loom, depleting oil reserves, bond market warnings near 5% yields, dollar weakening as gold and BRICS rise, and global food security threats from disrupted energy and fertilizers. Detailed takeaway. This is strategic paradigm shift territory. Post-World War II forward basing assumptions no longer hold in an era of precision long-range strikes. McGregor has warned for years that these bases are liabilities, not assets. Economically, war acceleration could trigger U.S. debt crisis, accelerate de-dollarization, and spark global famine by reversing Green Revolution gains. The human cost, especially in the global South and Europe, dwarfs U.S. domestic impacts. Politicians focused on short-term lobbies ignore the world-altering stakes. This conflict could force America toward a more restrained, homeland-focused defense posture, ending decades of offensive global posture. A painful but perhaps necessary reckoning. How do you see America's role in the Middle East evolving after this? Drop your thoughts below and let's discuss. Thanks for watching World Talk Recap. Stay informed, stay ahead. Subscribe for more powerful recaps. What segment hit hardest for you?